December 7, 1941. A quiet Sunday morning shattered by fire. Pearl Harbor burns beneath the rising sun of Japan. In less than 2 hours, the Pacific Fleet lies crippled. Battleships sunk, airfields destroyed, over 2,000 Americans dead. The unthinkable has happened. The United States, once distant from the chaos of war, is dragged into the inferno. Across the nation, anger and disbelief turn into a single demand: revenge. But there is a problem. Japan lies an ocean away, far beyond the reach of any American bomber. There is no path for retaliation until one man decides to make the impossible possible. His name is James Harold Doolittle, a pilot, an engineer, and a visionary. He believes there is always a way if one dares to risk everything. In the darkness following Pearl Harbor, Doolittle begins to imagine a strike so bold, so insane, that it could lift a nation from despair. He will take bombers never meant for the sea and launch them from the deck of a carrier straight into the heart of Japan. A mission with no way back, the flight with no return. The smoke of Pearl Harbor had barely cleared when an idea began to form, a whisper in the chaos. How do you strike back against an enemy across an ocean? How do you show a wounded nation that the impossible can still be done? That question reached a man named James Harold Doolittle. To the public, he was already a legend, a record-breaking aviator, a scientist, a daredevil. But to those who knew him best, Doolittle was something more dangerous, a man who never accepted the word impossible. In January 1942, only weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Doolittle was called to Washington. There, behind locked doors and blackout curtains, he was asked a question no one could yet answer. "Can we bomb Tokyo?" Doolittle didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, "but we'll have to do it differently." The room fell silent. They all knew what that meant. There were no air bases close enough, no bombers with the range to fly to Japan and come back alive. But Doolittle's mind was already racing. If they couldn't fly from land, they would fly from the sea. It was a plan so outrageous, so suicidal, that even the most hardened generals thought it was madness. But Doolittle didn't care. He was not looking for approval, only for a way forward. The idea was simple in words, but insane in execution. Take a medium bomber, the B-25 Mitchell, a 15-ton aircraft designed for long airstrips, and somehow launch it from the narrow deck of an aircraft carrier. A floating runway only 150 meters long. No one had ever tried it. No one thought it could be done. The Navy laughed at first. "These ships are for fighters," they said. "Bombers are too big, too heavy. They'll dive straight into the ocean before their wheels leave the deck." But Doolittle was not a man who accepted laughter. He went to the airfields, measured, calculated, tested. He stripped the B-25s of every unnecessary pound: guns, armor, radios, even the bottom turret. He modified fuel tanks, recalibrated engines, and trained his pilots to take off in just 500 feet, half the length of a football field. It wasn't enough to make the plane lighter. It needed pilots who were willing to die trying. 80 men volunteered. Every single one knew the truth. There was no guarantee they'd ever come home. They trained in secret at Eglinfield, Florida. Day after day, they practiced short takeoffs, racing across runways barely long enough for a car to stop. The first time they tried, the wheels barely cleared the fence. The second time, a little higher. By the 10th, they could do it with their eyes closed. When Doolittle saw it, he simply nodded. "That'll do." The plan was now officially approved. Operation Special Aviation Project Number 1. A name so vague even the crews didn't know what they were really signing up for. Their target was never spoken aloud. Only a handful of men in Washington knew the truth. They were going to strike Tokyo itself. To carry them into range, the Navy assigned the USS Hornet, one of America's newest aircraft carriers. It would sail deep into enemy waters, escorted by destroyers and cruisers. A fleet heading into the lion's den. Every risk imaginable was on the table. If the Japanese spotted them early, the carrier would be sunk. If the bombers failed to take off, they'd crash into the waves. And even if they reached Japan, There would be no fuel left to come back. Their only hope, fly west across the East China Sea and somehow land in China, if they were still alive. It was, by every military standard, a suicide mission. But to Doolittle, it was something else. A message. A message to the enemy. That America could reach them. A message to his own people. That hope was not dead. As March turned to April, the bombers were loaded onto the Hornet under the cover of night. The sea was rough. The deck creaked under the weight of aircraft never meant to be there. Sailors watched in silence as the giant B-25s were tied down. 16 of them, lined up wing to wing, their noses pointing toward the endless horizon. On each fuselage, hand-painted names like Whiskey Pete, Harry Carrier, the Ruptured Duck. Men whistled nervously as they worked. They all knew what this meant. This wasn't just another mission. This was history in the making, or a funeral waiting to happen. On the morning of April 18, 1942, the Hornet's captain radioed a single-coded message to Washington. The Doolittle Raiders are ready. In that moment, 80 men aboard 16 bombers stood between despair and defiance. They were about to carry the hopes of an entire nation into the sky and into the unknown. The engines roared to life. The ocean wind screamed across the deck, and somewhere in the distance the rising sun awaited. The mad plan was no longer an idea. It was real, and there would be no turning back. April 18, 1942. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly beneath a gray, stormy sky. The USS Hornet battles waves that rise like walls, its deck slick with salt and rain. Upon it, 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers, massive, restless beasts straining against the wind. This is it, the day the impossible becomes real. At dawn, a lookout spots something on the horizon. A Japanese patrol boat. The alarm blares. Enemy vessel sighted. Range 10 miles. The fleet opens fire. The patrol boat sinks, but not before sending a warning radio signal back to Japan. The mission is exposed. Doolittle has a choice. Abort and save the ships, or launch now, 800 kilometers too early, with no hope of returning. He doesn't hesitate. We launch. Now the order echoes across the ship like thunder. Crews rush to prepare the bombers. Winds roar at 40 knots. The Hornet pitches violently as waves slam its bow. The deck is barely long enough for a fighter, let alone a 15-ton bomber. Engines ignite, twin propellers slicing the storm air. Oil and smoke fill the morning haze. Men shout over the roar. Each pilot knows what this means. If they fail to lift off within seconds, they'll crash straight into the sea. Doolittle climbs into the cockpit of Plane 1. He adjusts his goggles, glances once toward the horizon, then pushes the throttles forward. The Mitchell leaps ahead, tires bouncing on the wet deck. Spray lashes the windshield. The end of the runway rushes closer. 100 feet, 50, 20, and then lift. The bomber rises, skimming the wave tops, its wheels missing the ocean by barely a meter. The crew exhales. They've done it. When one by one, the others follow. Each takeoff is a gamble between skill and luck. Engines scream. Men pray. Some planes dip so low the propellers cut the spray before clawing their way into the air. On deck, sailors cheer, wave their caps, their faces pale from fear and pride. 16 bombers lift off into the wind, heading west toward the heart of Japan. When the last aircraft disappears into the clouds, the Hornet turns away, retreating into the storm. Its job is done. The bombers are on their own now. No fighter escort, no radio contact, no way home. For the next 6 hours, they will fly low over an endless ocean, through wind, rain, and silence. Every minute, the fuel gauge drops lower. Every mile brings them closer to Tokyo and to their fate. But for now, as the clouds close behind them, one truth remains clear. Against every law of logic, against every limit of courage, they have flown. The Doolittle Raiders are in the air. The mission is alive. And somewhere ahead, beyond the horizon, the enemy awaits. 6 hours after leaving the Hornet, the gray Pacific gives way to land. The islands of Japan faint beneath the clouds. For the 80 men aboard 16 bombers, it's the first time any American plane has ever reached these skies. The crews tighten their straps, check their bombs, and drop to just 1,500 feet, low enough to evade detection, but high enough to see their target. The skies over Tokyo are calm, deceptively peaceful. Below them, the city sprawls, a sea of wooden rooftops, factories, and shipyards, unprepared for what's coming. Doolittle's plane is first. He sights a gas refinery and banking district in the crosshairs. He gives a short command, bombs away. The aircraft jolts as the payload releases. 4 500-pound bombs fall into the heart of Tokyo. A moment later, the earth erupts in fire. Smoke rises into the morning air, and for the first time since Pearl Harbor, the war has reached Japan itself. Owan. Within minutes, the other bombers arrive, spreading out toward Yokohama, Kobe, Nagoya, Osaka. They strike docks, factories, power stations, military targets chosen to send a message, not to destroy a nation. Anti-aircraft guns begin to roar. Black bursts of shrapnel fill the sky. Tracer fire streaks past the wings, but the B-25s keep coming. Civilians look up, frozen, watching silver planes flash above the rooftops. No one can believe it. America has come to Tokyo. One crew reports smoke so thick they can barely see the horizon. Another flies so low they can feel the heat from burning oil tanks. Still, they press on. There is no turning back now. In less than an hour, it's over. The last bombs fall. The last targets burn. Each plane turns west, toward China, toward the unknown. Behind them, the sky of Tokyo glows red. For the first time in the war, Japan feels the touch of fear. And though the damage is small, the message is thunderous. America's not broken. The sleeping giant has awakened. The bombs are gone. The mission is complete. But the hardest part is just beginning. The 16 bombers turn west, away from the burning cities of Japan, toward the open sea and the promise of China. They have no radio contact, no navigational beacon, and far less fuel than planned. Launching early had cost them everything now. They are flying on hope and empty tanks. Dark clouds gather on the horizon, a storm brews, rolling across the East China Sea. Lightning flashes like artillery fire. Rain slams against the fuselage, and the wind howls as if the ocean itself wants them back. Inside the cockpits, the men fight exhaustion and fear. Some check the fuel gauge, the needle buried on empty. Others whisper silent prayers. The turbulence is brutal. One bomber plunges hundreds of feet, barely pulling up in time. Another loses its bearings, swallowed by the clouds. Still, they push forward, hour after hour, flying blind through the storm. Below them, nothing but endless black water. Above them, flashes of lightning reveal shattered glimpses of wings and rain. They can't see each other, but they know somewhere out there, their brothers are still flying too. After 13 hours in the air, the coast of China finally appears faint and dark beneath the storm. Relief floods through the crews, but the fuel is gone. Engines sputter, propellers slow. One by one, the bombers begin to fall from the sky. Some crews bail out into the rain, tumbling through darkness toward unknown land. Others crash land in rice fields or mountains, their planes breaking apart on impact. The rest vanish into the storm, never seen again. James Doolittle leaps from his own bomber, parachuting into the night. He hits the ground hard, bruised and alone, unsure if the mission has been a triumph or a tragedy. The wind still roars through the valleys of China, but amid the wreckage and rain, a single truth endures. They had crossed an ocean, defied logic, and struck the enemy's heart. And though the storm raged on, their courage burned brighter than ever. When dawn broke over China, the storm had passed, but the world had changed. Scattered across mountains and fields, the Doolittle Raiders struggled to survive. Some were rescued by Chinese villagers. Others were captured by Japanese forces. A few never made it home. Yet despite the losses, word of the raid spread like wildfire. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, the people of America felt something they had forgotten: hope. The damage to Japan had been small, but the impact was seismic. Tokyo had been struck, its myth of invincibility shattered. Japan pulled back forces to defend its homeland, a shift that would shape the course of the Pacific War. Back in the United States, when the truth of the mission was revealed, the nation erupted in pride. Headlines called it the Doolittle Raid. To the people, it was proof that courage could rise even from despair. James Doolittle, believing he had failed, that too many men had been lost, that the raid had achieved too little, was summoned to the White House. There, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before him and said, "You've given America the courage to fight again." Doolittle was promoted to general and awarded the Medal of Honor. But to him, the real heroes were the 80 men who took off from that stormy deck with no promise of return. Years later, when asked how they found the strength, one raider simply said, "We weren't thinking of glory. We were thinking of duty." The world has changed since 1942, but the echo of their courage still lingers in every pilot who dares the sky, in every mission where the odds seem impossible. The Doolittle Raid was more than an attack. It was a declaration that freedom would not bow, that faith could fly farther than fear. And as long as history remembers, the roar of 16 bombers over Tokyo will forever echo across the sky, the sound of courage itself.